loggers, welcome back to Liminal Logs. I just want to say, I love doing this. Making these stories, building this creepy little universe for you all. It's honestly something I'm proud of. The dream is to make this a full-time thing one day. But for now, we're still on the way up. So, if you enjoy what I do and want to see more, hit like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, and most importantly, share the videos with your friends. Let's push this channel to 1,000 loggers together. Let's dive into today's story. I hadn't been back to my childhood house in almost 15 years. I didn't plan on returning either. Not after the things that happened there. Not after the way my family insisted we never speak of it again. Not after the police reports mysteriously vanished and the entire street collectively decided the house didn't have a basement. It did. I remember it too clearly to pretend otherwise. And after everything I saw down there, after the one night that reshaped me into someone I didn't recognize for years afterward, I swore I would never step foot inside that house again. But the dead don't care about promises, and the letter I received last Thursday didn't give me a choice. It was a plain white envelope, no return address, no stamp. Just my name written in dark blue ink in handwriting I hadn't seen since I was 11 years old. My mother's handwriting. She died 12 years ago. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of thick paper, the kind we used to buy for her scrapbooks, and 6 words written in that same smooth looping script. He is still watching from below. No greeting, no warning, no explanation. Just that. I must have read it 100 times. Not because I doubted my own eyes, but because part of me hoped the words would rearrange themselves into something sane if I stared long enough. They didn't. The second thing in the envelope was even worse. A photograph. An old Polaroid, bent at the corners. It had been taken in the basement hallway of my old house. I recognized the peeling wallpaper instantly, that hideous green floral pattern I used to trace with my finger while I waited for my mother to come down the stairs. But the photograph wasn't centered on the wallpaper. It was focused on the window. That narrow ground-level basement window. The one that looked out into the side yard. The one that was always too dark, even on the brightest days. The one I used to avoid looking at because sometimes it felt like someone on the other side was staring back at me. In the Polaroid, something was pressed against the glass. Not a face. Not exactly. The silhouette was long, lean, lurking just outside where the grass met the foundation. A hand, too thin, too long, rested against the window pane, and a pair of pale, reflective eyes stared into the basement from the other side. Eyes that were not shaped like any human's. Eyes that I remembered too well. Eyes I used to dream about for years. I dropped the photo like it was burning me. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up. Those eyes glowed faintly even in the dim light of my apartment. Something in me snapped. Something old. Something I thought I'd buried. Something I thought therapy, distance, and time had killed. I picked up my keys. I packed a flashlight, a camera, and a knife I had no idea how to use. And I drove. The house. It took me 2 hours to reach the old neighborhood. The air felt heavier there, like the trees remembered things they shouldn't. My childhood home looked wrong, too still, too quiet, like a picture of a house instead of a real one. The lawn had grown tall, color drained from the shutters, the paint peeling in long strips like shedding skin. The curtains in the living room were drawn tight, but the fabric bulged unnaturally, like something was pressing against them from the inside. The porch creaked under my weight. The front door was unlocked. I stepped in and the smell hit me first. Damp, dust, wood rot, and something else beneath it. Something metallic and faintly sweet. The air tasted like old blood. The lights didn't work, but the house wasn't dark. The faint gray glow from the cloudy sky seeped through the windows just enough to outline the furniture. The same furniture we left behind the day we moved, untouched, covered in sheets like corpses waiting to be identified. But none of that mattered, because the moment I stepped inside, I heard it. A sound I hadn't heard since childhood. A slow, deliberate tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Coming from directly beneath me, from the basement. I froze. The sound stopped. Then it tapped again. Harder this time. Like whoever was down there wanted me to know exactly where they were. Tap, tap, right below the hallway, right beneath the spot where I now stood, right in front of the basement door, the door I had sworn never to open again. The door I had nightmares about for years. But the letter had said, "He is still watching from below." So I walked toward it. Every step felt heavier, like the house was pulling me in, swallowing me into its lungs. The basement door stood at the end of the hallway, white paint, rust around the hinges, a small lock above the handle, still broken from the night everything went wrong. My hand hovered over the doorknob. The tapping stopped. Silence stretched through the house like a held breath. Then a slow scraping sound slid across the basement floorboards below me, like fingernails, dragging, following my movements. I swallowed, turned the knob, and opened the door. The smell that rushed out was cold, wet, wrong. something old and moldy, mixed with a scent like stagnant water and rotting leaves. The staircase plunged downward into darkness. I clicked on my flashlight. The beam flickered. Of course it flickered. Why wouldn't it? I pointed it down the stairs slowly. The light barely reached the bottom, just enough to reveal the peeling wallpaper, the cracked concrete floor, and the basement window at the far end, half hidden behind shadows and grime. My heart stopped, because something was standing in front of it, something tall, thin, silent, watching, just a silhouette, perfectly still, facing the stairs, facing me. My breath caught, my knees weakened. The thing didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink, just waited. The air grew colder, and I realized I had come back after 15 years, and it had been waiting the entire time, waiting for me to open this door again, waiting for me to come back to the basement window, waiting for the child it had marked. And now, finally, after all these years, I had. I stood at the top of the stairs, fingers clamped so tight around the flashlight that my knuckles ached. The thin beam trembled as it pointed downward toward the thing standing in front of the basement window. It didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't shift even slightly. Its silhouette was carved into the darkness like it had been waiting there forever. Not a living creature, but a shadow with intention. My mouth went dry. I whispered without meaning to, "Is that you?" The silhouette didn't answer. It only adjusted its posture, so subtly I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't already been staring at it with every nerve in my body pulled tight as piano wire. A single jerk of its shoulder, a touch of motion in its neck, like someone stretching after being still for a very, very long time. My stomach twisted. No animal moved like that. No human moved like that. I should have closed the door, should have turned and run, should have burned the entire house to the ground and watched the flames from 1,000 miles away. But I didn't, because the house was doing something to me, something subtle, something internal. The same way humidity gets into your clothes, into your lungs, into your bones. This house sank into me. It wanted me to go down. And I did. The first step. The moment my foot touched the top stair, the air changed. The temperature dropped sharply. Not icy, but cold enough that my breath fogged in front of me. The house was warm upstairs, but down here, the cold had personality, direction, shape. It pressed against my skin like invisible fingers. I took the second step, the third. Each wooden stair groaned softly beneath my weight, as if complaining about bearing a burden it remembered too well. Halfway down, I stopped. The silhouette at the bottom still hadn't moved, but the shadow behind it had changed. The shadow was thicker, darker, deeper than the rest of the room. Not absence of light, absence of space, as if reality was thinner behind it, as if something enormous was pressed against the other side of that window, using the silhouette as a viewing slit, waiting, watching, breathing just below the threshold of sound. My fingers shook on the flashlight, but I kept walking, because something stronger than fear was pulling me. Memory. The memory I didn't want. By the time I reached the bottom of the stairs, something clicked inside my mind. A small sound. A latch. A door unlocking in a long hallway of forgotten thoughts. My childhood. I hadn't thought of it in years. Not this house, not this place, not the basement, not those nights. But now it came back. Piece by piece, I remembered being 8 years old, sitting at the bottom of these same stairs, holding a little red toy car in my hands. I remembered the soft tapping on the window that came every night around 2 a.m., the same rhythm I heard on the floor above earlier. Tap, tap, tap. I remembered waking my mother the first time it happened. I remembered how she froze when she heard it, the way her face drained of color, the way she whispered "not again" under her breath before insisting it was the house settling. But the sound wasn't from the foundation. It wasn't in the pipes. It wasn't the house. It was a knock from the window, from something that didn't belong outside, something that didn't belong anywhere. I remembered asking her, "Mom, why don't we just move?" And she answered, with a voice trembling despite trying to sound calm, "Because it's not after the house." Then she hugged me too tightly and didn't sleep for days. I thought it was just nightmares. But the basement window, God, the basement window. I remembered it. Not clearly, like a flicker, but I remembered light, eyes, shapes, breaths fogging the glass from the outside when the night air was too warm for condensation. I didn't want to remember more, but memory isn't a choice. The window. Now, standing in the basement again for the first time in 15 years, I aimed the flashlight directly at the window. The silhouette soaked in the light without reflecting it, not absorbing, swallowing. Its body wasn't flesh or fabric. It was density, a shape of something much darker than the room around it. Slowly, painfully slowly, it began to shift weight onto one leg. The sound of its foot touching the wooden floor was impossibly soft, as if its body weighed nothing, and yet the boards beneath it trembled, like they feared it. Then I realized something else, something worse. It wasn't standing in front of the basement window. It was standing inside it. Its legs didn't cast shadows on the wall. Its feet didn't distort the floor dust. It was caught halfway between two realities. One foot here, one foot wherever it came from. It was emerging, trying to step into my world. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I stayed, because behind that silhouette, behind those long, sharp outlines, there were eyes, huge, pale, opalescent eyes pressed against the other side of the glass, too big to belong to anything human, too round, too animal, too intelligent. Except intelligence wasn't the right word. Hunger was. Those eyes stared at me with the same recognition I saw in the photograph. The same familiarity. The same possessive stillness. It knew me. It always knew me. It had never forgotten the boy who used to sit in front of that window. It had never forgotten the only child stupid enough to look back at it. Now it saw me grown, and it was pleased, because I was finally big enough to take the scrape. Something scraped across the concrete behind the window. A long, slow drag, like fingers with too many joints tracing the cracks in the foundation. The silhouette jerked its head toward me. Not smoothly, not in a living way, but like a puppet pulled violently by a string. My breath hitched. The flashlight beam caught its shape again. And I saw it. I saw its face. Just for a moment. Just a sliver. Enough to break the person I thought I was. Its face wasn't a face. It was a mask. Human-shaped only in outline, with a mouth too horizontal like the carved line of a wooden puppet, eyes replaced by deep, perfect pits of absence, not emptiness, absence, as though the shape of the face had been carved directly out of the basement darkness. Everything about it felt wrong. Wrong in the way that bypasses thought. Wrong in the way nightmares feel wrong. Wrong in the way instinct screams, "This should not exist." My stomach churned. My legs trembled. The creature turned fully toward me now, its form unraveling slightly at the edges, as if it was shedding one shape to become another. For the first time, the shadow behind it, the one in the window, moved too. A gigantic hand pressed against the glass from the outside. Long fingers, longer than human, longer than possible. The glass bowed inward. Webbed cracks spread like thin white veins. A single piece broke off, then another. The scraping outside grew louder, hungrier. The creature inside stepped forward. 1 step. 2. The floorboards creaked under weight that wasn't weight. And then it spoke. A low, rattling whisper that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. You finally came back down. My throat closed. My will broke, and the thing kept coming.